Welcome to Unfiltered Conversations. I am your host, Chichi Eliogu. And today we are diving into a topic that affects millions of people across Africa, and especially here in Nigeria. This past week, several African countries officially rolled out groundbreaking HIV vaccine. Countries like South Africa, Zambia, and Eswatini have already started giving it to the public. It's a huge step forward in the fight against HIV. But here is a big question. Why is it Nigeria on that list? Even though we have one of the largest population in Africa and a significant HIV burden, we are not among the first countries getting access. And it's not the first time we have seen this happen. We've also seen delays with other vaccines and health innovations, HPV vaccines, malaria vaccines, childhood immunization updates. Even when these vaccines are available, there may be hesitancy. So today we are unpacking all of this, the science, the politics, the fears, and the real-life challenges that affect vaccine rollout in Nigeria. Are we slow to adapt to new health trials? Is this a government issue? Is this a trust issue, a funding issue, or all of the above? To help us To help us break this down, we have an amazing guest, Dr. Jimmy Mack, a community physician and pharmaceutical research analyst and clinical trial associate. Let's get into this Unfiltered. Hello, Dr. Jimmy.
Hello, Chichi.
It's good to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
This is a very deep conversation. So let's talk about the vaccines. For those who haven't heard about the vaccine before, what makes this vaccine different, this HIV vaccine different, and how does it stand out from the usual PrEP, pills that we all know?
Well, we were going to start by saying it's not technically a vaccine in the broadest sense of the term.
Okay.
It is a medication, lenacapavir, that has been in the market for a little while now. But I believe the injectable form of it is a new development. And through the process of clinical trials, it has been discovered that it can be used as a preventative in high risk, high exposure individuals. So it is a medication, not a vaccine. And that is a distinction that needs to be very well identified. Although the use or the development of this medication from ground up into what we call aftermarket, where patients and clients can start getting it, follows the same process as what a newly developed vaccine would follow. So colloquially, if you want to call it a vaccine, it's something that can be excused, but it's a medication. It has a name. It's not a vaccine in the sense of Typically, vaccines are a disabled or dead form of the disease that you are trying to combat, being injected into the system for the system to be able to recognize it and fight it more effectively should it be ever exposed to an active form of that same infection or disease down the line later in life. So, in this case, this is a medication and not a dead form of the HIV virus.
Okay.
Exactly. So that's why technically it's not a vaccine, but it is being used as in the same way a vaccine would be used.
But either way, this is a step forward.
Yes,
from
it is. It's a huge step forward. And what the research has shown and what is being done now in clinics in the countries that you mentioned in your intro is that they are encouraging people, high-risk individuals, to come and get this shot twice a year. So that, I guess, every 6 months, because of the effect it has in preventing basic level HIV from forming and multiplying in the system. Because any disease, virus, bacteria that you are exposed to, it's going to get introduced into the system in whatever system method is introduced: air, droplets, sexual intercourse, blood, sharing needles, ingestion, eating, drinking. However, when it gets into the system, it attacks your organs and uses your body system to replicate itself. So it makes copies of itself that then attacks your body. HIV is one of the most potent viruses that does that. And when it gets into your system, it's basically impossible to get it out, which is why over the last 4 or 5 decades that HIV has been a thing, all the methods of treating and managing have been in development. And another point that is worth noting is that as compared to many diseases in the history of man, and this is a very salient point,
Okay.
HIV is relatively new to humans.
Relatively.
We're talking a history of no more than 50 years. It really came into the zeitgeist in the 80s. So it would explain why we are a little bit behind in the treatment and management and prevention of HIV.
You mean here in Nigeria?
I mean
generally?
globally.
Globally.
Right. Of course, Nigeria has its own challenges that leaves us a step or two behind in every case.
I mean, that is why I can't help but ask, why do we not have access to these vaccines? Why is there a rollout in just 4 countries in Africa? And we are supposedly the giant of Africa. Why is this happening?
I'm going to be approaching the answer to that question from a clinical trials perspective.
Okay.
A typical clinical trial for a new drug coming in from what is known as a sponsor, a developer. For example, let's say Pfizer, Moderna, all these major global drug companies. Even before it gets to the clinical stage, there is usually the animal testing phase. So again, and this is the reason why clinical medicine, traditional medicine, and the traditional medicine, the tradomedicals go hand in hand. A lot of the products that are in medications that we use today are sourced from nature or analogs of things that you get from nature. So like a variation, maybe you extract something from a plant and then you modify it and then put it into a pill. It gets tested on animals and then it gets into clinical trials. Clinical trials has typically 4 phases, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 2 and 3 can be broken down into 2A, 2B. It's complex. It's what I do, but phase 1 typically is just testing the drug on healthy individuals.
Okay.
Right? Just to see how the body interacts with the medication, because the system flushes it out, how long it lasts in the system. Then phase 2, going into phase 3 is when you are testing the medication on individuals that need it. So whether it's a preventative drug, high-risk individuals, or it's a treatment drug, so people who already have the disease that you are trying to manage. So for example, let's say hypertension. Hypertension is something that has been managed for decades on decades now, but every day, all these major drug companies are developing new medications to try and control the blood pressure better. So you bring in maybe in one clinic, say you do about 20 people per clinic, 100 clinics all over the world between North America, Europe, Central America, just to see different populations and how the medication works. They're already managing their blood pressure with other novel medications that have been in circulation for decades. Then you are now looking for certain subjects who are either not responding well, or there are certain parameters, head to toe, kidneys, lungs, liver, or they have diabetes as well, or they are obese as well. Just certain other things that you're bringing them in just to see how well this new medication works. And then you get into phase 3B, going into phase 4. Phase 4 is aftermarket, which I believe this HIV injection is in.
Okay.
Phase 4 is aftermarket, but it's not widely accepted. For example, as of October, this medication has not been approved by the US FDA.
As of October?
As of October 15th, which is the last update I have for this HIV injection, it hasn't been approved by the US FDA for general use. And the US FDA, I mean, with all things America, is usually like a beacon that many other countries model after. And it's not because there are no benefits to the medication. It's because every country in the world has their own regulations. And then on top of that, there are international standards. The company that developed this lenacapavir is not an African company. The testing is being done in these African countries because of the burden of HIV in these African countries being bigger than most elsewhere in the world. Nigeria inclusive.
Oh, why so though?
I mean, if you have a product, because that's what every medication, vaccine, injection is, you are going to want to test out that product in the places that need it the most. If you have an ice making machine, you're going to want to sell it in temperate countries like Nigeria, in Lagos. You're not going to take your ice making machine to northern Russia to sell it in the middle of December. There's ice falling from the sky. Nobody needs it. So it's a needs must thing. HIV is a pandemic. It's a global problem. But some places have it more than others.
Okay.
Year in, year out, when we're approaching December time and the whole dirty December period is coming and you're talking about people that are coming from abroad, there are always these messages going around, oh, be careful about who you interact with, protect yourself, because HIV is a more serious problem where you're going as against where you live. So for that, it's that. One thing that working in clinical trials has exposed me to is the fact that there are thousands of medications in development. I'll give you a little bit of an inside scoop right now. You know the what we call the GLP-1 medications.
Absolutely, the one for the weight loss.
Ozempic, Mounjaro. Yeah. I mean, those drugs weren't developed for weight loss.
Oh.
A good example of that would be the drug that they use for erectile dysfunction.
Oh,
the blue pill.
The blue pill.
It was, the compounds in that medication were developed as something to reduce blood pressure. The sustained erection that comes as a result of using it was an unexpected side effect. Turns out that medication wasn't particularly effective at managing blood pressure. It did bring it down a bit, but it wasn't as good as in managing blood pressure as other medications. It took a marketer who I believe worked for Pfizer at the time. I think this was in the 80s. There's a movie about this.
There's a movie about it. There's a romantic comedy about it.
He started pushing it as an ED medication, erectile dysfunction.
And it sold out.
And it took off.
And it's still till now.
It's one of the highest selling drugs in the world. Same thing with the GLP-1 injections, the Ozempics, the Mounjaros. They were majorly developed for diabetes as a way of bringing down the blood sugar. Not as effective as the current treatment options that are available, and then had the massive side effect of reducing appetite and increasing body functions to the point where...
Oh, I think I remember it's called Viagra.
Viagra, yes.
Viagra.
Yeah. Making people lose weight at extraordinarily unseen
times.
And now, as a result, I mean, Mounjaro, for example, is developed by Eli Lilly. I think Ozempic is Moderna, I'm not sure. There are hundreds of similar drugs in development now. Now, these companies are not doing it just because they care about the weights of everybody on the planet, but because the demand is high.
It's high.
So in a roundabout way, I think I've answered the question as to why a drug developed by, European, American companies are being tested in Africa. It's because of the HIV burden. It's because of where it's needed.
So but this particular one that came out and it's come out in some African countries, here in Nigeria, why do we not have it? Why is it not here? You expect that with the kind of population we have, there should be a rollout here. It's not here.
The reality of being Nigerian, as you and I know, is that expectation and reality hardly ever combine. But I'm going to speak professionally and not speak from the heart because the heart is there. And as somebody who lives and works clinically in Nigeria, I know the challenges of even the most basic things. But we're making it work and we will continue to make it work.
For sure.
But from a professional point of view, Nigeria's population is always going to be a problem.
Okay.
Always going to be a problem.
I mean, I genuinely want to counter this conversation of population, but then we might end up wasting a lot of time.
Yeah,
because
there are other factors that I'm going to mention. Population is always one. And the Federal Ministry of Health, NMA, all the people in charge of our healthcare sector in Nigeria have, I would say, a bit of an extraordinary burden in trying to determine what would be countrywide policy. Because we are talking about the population density of Nigeria is ridiculous. Let's be very honest. We've got over 200 million people living in an area barely larger than the size of maybe 2 American states like Texas or something. It's crazy. And that is over half the population of the entire American population. So the population density in Nigeria is a lot. And it makes it very, very difficult to manage policy in Nigeria. That's one thing. And I'm speaking broadly. I'm not speaking about this particular injection, which, let me double back and say, you've made a fair point. Given Nigeria's HIV burden, whenever novel treatment comes in for anything, Nigeria should be considered quite highly. Nigeria should be considered quite highly. Even not just HIV, something like COVID, for example, that was unprecedented and nobody knew how it was going to go. If there was going to be a treatment, if there was going to be a vaccine, just because of the population density of Nigeria, that there are so many people here who, one, have the potential to catch this disease, and two, have the potential to spread it. Nigeria is one of the highest emigrating countries in the world.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So if we have that many people that are traveling, that are moving about, that are interacting with people from other countries, we should be considered highly for anything. But then the second conversation that then comes in is government oversight, government overreach, people meddling in affairs that they probably shouldn't, that complicate matters. I mean, over the last 30 years, Nigeria has a profound history of being considered for a lot of novel technologies, medications, things like that. And then when these outside entities come to Nigeria to try and establish things, and they encounter the people that run our policy, they experience so much pushback that they end up going to Ghana, they end up going to South Africa, they end up going
because I was going to mention that there are some cases where you see some of these people, NGOs, coming with these vaccines, they want to help. And it's almost like there's a form of hesitancy, not just from the government, but even from the people.
Yes. So
you see someone comes, I want to give vaccines to kids. And then you have to now explain to them and try to convince them that you're not trying to kill this child, but you're just trying to do this for the betterment of the child.
Vaccine hesitancy is a global problem.
Oh, it's not just a Nigerian thing.
In fact, and I'm just speaking purely, this is non-statistic, but I would say Nigerians in general have a higher acceptance to novel treatments than people from countries with a higher level of baseline education.
Why do you say so?
And I'll explain. A lot of Nigerians flooded to get the COVID vaccine when it first came out. And as somebody in the front line who was actually administering this COVID vaccine, there were a lot of people who were getting this shot who didn't even know what it was, how it was developed, and how it was supposed to keep them safe. But they trusted healthcare professionals that said, keep them safe. As a matter of fact, the pushback that we get as Nigerian healthcare practitioners is more from educated people who are exposed to information and misinformation. I'm making a distinction between those two. The information that is out there about side effects, legitimate, about potential long-term effects, about issues, and then misinformation that is pushed even unfortunately, by healthcare workers. The person who was the champion of the vaccines cause autism conversation in the 90s and 2000s was a medical doctor. It wasn't somebody or a group of people who said, my kids got vaccines and now they are autistic. No, it was a medical doctor who, because I can't read minds and nobody can, maybe actually believed that there was a correlation between the vaccines that he was giving children and the fact that a lot of these children were later developing neurodivergent disorders or neurodivergency. I mean, and it was such, I'll put it this way, there was a lot of credibility to what he was saying at first, to the point where other medical entities had to jump up and study what he was saying. So I don't think he was rubbished out of the bat, like, you're saying rubbish, or you're saying nonsense. People came out and did statistical analysis.
Okay.
And, for example, even the president of the United States has directly and indirectly propagated this vaccines cause autism nonsense.
I mean, people have been pushing that propaganda for as long as possible.
For when that particular individual started it. And this man got so thoroughly debunked and disgraced that they took his license away. He actually faced charges in the US for spreading misinformation. But the thing is, as Charlemagne the God would always say, People don't care about the truth if the lie is more entertaining, if the lie is more intriguing, if the lie captivates more. I mean, we are Nigerians. We are very, very good at pushing propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
We say things, even just in everyday conversation, that we know is not true, but it's fun to say. But the only issue is that when you're talking about vaccine hesitancy, medications, and people's lives are at risk. Right? In the US now, for example, we're having comebacks of diseases that were basically eradicated, or at least we weren't seeing new cases.
But the thing is, I understand that you some people can spread misinformation.
Mhm.
But do you not think that to an extent, right, some of these vaccines may not be fully tested and people have a right to be worried about these vaccines? Are they 101% good?
If you get up in the morning before you go to work and you want to jump in your car,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a paranoid feeling that all is not well with your car,
Mm-hmm.
you check your tires, you pop up your hood, you check your oil. A mechanic would advise you to do that every day before you jump in your car and move out. And it's fair advice, but there are going to be days where you are in a rush. Makeup took a little bit too long, you forgot a bag or a document or something, and then you just jump in your car and drive. And if there's an issue, you call your mechanic because you're trusting that your mechanic's advice is sound. You see, I'm a proponent of skepticism. The thing I enjoy the most about clinical practice is interacting with patients. If I finish with a patient, especially on a complex issue, and that patient doesn't have one or two questions for me, I feel like I haven't done a good enough job. It's a personal thing. If I explain it to you perfectly and you understand it 100%, that's fantastic. But a lot of people are not going to get the information they need from the right sources because the right sources are not readily available. I know how hard it was for you to coordinate me being here today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because you didn't try, it's because of my schedule. If I can touch one person today and say, like, okay, vaccines are safe, go ahead. Now, vaccine hesitancy can also be caused by the speed at which it's done. But as somebody who has worked in clinical trials indirectly for about 5 years and directly for 2 years now, it is one of the most vigorous scientific processes ever. The evidence could be right there that this is a miracle drug that can cure everything, but you will still go through
rounds of testing,
every phase of clinical trials before it ever touches market. Some of the world's wealthiest, richest people are taking some of these drugs that are under development because they have the money, the power, the access to it, based on little to no evidence, just because they've already seen it work in 3 people, in 4 people. We're talking about testing in thousands and millions. This HIV injection now is going to touch at least 5 million people before the end of this year. Which means a year from now, when they are supposed to be getting their 3rd shots, because we're saying it's every 6 months, we will have enough data across the board for millions of people to see just how effective it is. And remember, this is a preventative shot. It's not a treatment shot. So the only data that you can extrapolate from that is, has the rate of transmission of HIV gone down? So it's not even just about the injection itself. Are we maintaining testing? Are we increasing testing? Are there other factors? Okay, for example, somebody that feels like I'm so active sexually that I need this HIV injection is probably also someone who cares more about contraception. For example, maybe a sex worker.
Yeah.
Statistically, sex workers have been proven to be the major proponents of safe sexual practices, condoms and other things, because they are so exposed to sex. They tend to not take as much risk as your typical everyday person. Will that information skew the results? Do you understand? Oh, I've taken the HIV injection, which means I'm somebody that is highly sexually active, highly exposed, multiple partners. Maybe I should use condoms more. Now, if the rates go down, how can we, the statisticians, prove that it's because of the injection? So it's because you have to cater to, and by the way, we're not now going to say, oh, because you've gotten the injection, go out and start having unprotected sex or having sex willingly because we want to test how the medication is working. We are not 100% there as yet to say that this is a 100% cure, and there are very few 100% cure-alls. If there were, there wouldn't be more than one anti-malaria drug in the market. There'd just be one. But because, you might take one brand today, it will work, another brand today, and there's so much fake and this and that, there's an explosion. We wouldn't need more than one GLP injection if there was one definite. So even this injection that we are talking about today, 5 years from now, there might be 6 or 7 different variants coming from 10 different companies. Pfizer might have their own, Moderna, Eli Lilly, everybody will have their own version of the same drug. How many types of paracetamol have you taken in your life?
Oh, there are about 3 to 4 versions.
Yeah, I'm sure it's more than that. Because when you were a kid, they were the ones that came in syrup form that mommy was getting for you, and probably those companies don't exist anymore. But when you were a kid, they worked for you. So even drugs that are already proven, that are already in market, they get tested and retested. We rushed the COVID vaccine because of the millions of people that were affected and the millions of people that were dying. Doesn't mean it didn't go through all the phases. It doesn't mean even after it came out, testing didn't continue. There are COVID vaccines being tested that are still in phase 1, phase 2 as we speak.
But talking about, are people still taking the vaccines for COVID?
Yes.
As much as they were taking it 5 years ago?
Definitely not.
Okay.
No. But I would encourage people with comorbidities that live in COVID endemic areas to still take the shots. I would encourage hypertensive, diabetic, elderly people who are more susceptible to COVID and its effects to take the shot. I would encourage people who travel a lot to take the shot. Because one thing about viruses especially, they have serotypes. For example, the HPV vaccine, which for me, in the last 20 years is probably the single greatest medical miracle. There are 2 types of cancers in women that are, if detected early or somewhat preventable: breast and cervical. There are a few serotypes of and by the way, HPV, the virus, human papilloma virus, has at last count over 50 serotypes.
Wow.
So we are talking about 1 to 50. In those serotypes, there are about 4 or 5 that if a woman has, by the way, global burden of HPV, about 1/3 of the world has HPV.
That is a lot.
1/3 of the entire planet has HPV. If you have ever had sex, there's a 1 in 3 chance that you've been exposed to HPV. Just once. So, for example, federal institutions...
In case you don't know what is HPV, that is human papilloma virus.
And it is 3, 4, 5 serotypes of HPV are responsible for the development of cervical cancer in women. By the way, you can get the HPV vaccine. It's always advised before commencing and before your first ever sexual intercourse, but even after, as long as you are not infected. Right? Because it can help prevent cervical cancer later in life. Doesn't mean it can prevent you from having HPV. I just said 1/3 of the world has it. But, in medicine, you think, when you hear hoofbeats, you think of horses, not zebras. We always go for the more common things first before you go for the uncommon. But if there's something that is available, please do. I don't think there are any doctors around that are going about pushing vaccines that they themselves will not take. I was among the first to line up for the COVID shot even before we knew as much about it now as we do. And I know this because I saw the batch number of the Moderna, which was the first set of COVID shots that came in. The bottle I got was from the first batch as early as, I think, March of 2021, which was pretty early by Nigerian standards. And I didn't take it then because I had to travel. I took it then because I was very exposed to COVID.
Because you were on the front line at the time.
Because of where I was working. I had seen so many cases. I'd seen so many deaths.
So, you have mentioned that Nigerians...
Oh, yeah, and I've also had COVID at least 4 times. Including after I got the shot. But then the severity of the symptoms was way less after I got the shot. So
the vaccines don't necessarily... So this is a preventive vaccine, does not mean that you cannot still have these things.
Exactly.
But, just like when we were younger, we would have, vaccines like chickenpox, smallpox, polio vaccines as well. And that has greatly reduced the number of poliomeningitis that a lot of people
are so close to eradicating polio now. It's a wonderful thing.
It's so amazing as compared to, back in the day. But then, talking about vaccines, you're saying that Nigerians are actually open to receiving vaccines.
There is hesitancy.
There's hesitancy,
yes.
But not necessarily from the people, the common man.
Yes, not necessarily from the common man.
So,
because they tend to believe more. It's when the education comes in that misinformation tends to follow it.
But some of these vaccines are actually donated for free. What can we now do better to be able to access these vaccines? Do we even have a malaria vaccine?
Okay, so the malaria vaccine was introduced into the Nigerian immunization schedule for children earlier this year.
Okay.
It's 4 shots, one at 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, and the last one at 15 months. The malaria vaccine is so new that we don't even know how good it is at preventing malaria or the severity of malaria when you have it. The development of the vaccine only finished a couple years ago, and I don't even think they are finished. I think they are still in aftermarket. I think they are still in phase 4. By the way, this goes back to your first question. The malaria vaccine, there was the opportunity for it to be developed in Nigeria. They faced government oversight and pushback. Then one of it got moved to Ghana, and I believe it's that one that we're using now.
Oh, wow.
It was introduced in 2 states in the Middle Belt as part of the first tranche, and they've been getting it for at least 6 months now. Lagos, where we are currently, is going to be part of the second batch of states that are going to introduce it. In fact, the Lagos immunization cards now have the malaria vaccine on the cards. And we've started telling, because I work in a vaccine clinic for young children, we've started telling our parents to be expectant of the malaria vaccine and encouraging them. You see, that education, letting people know what is and how it can help them is so important. Even regarding this malaria vaccine, now we've gotten pushback. And I asked some of the parents, do you have access to your own vaccine card for when you were a child? There are differences between the vaccines that we were getting in the 90s, even in the early 2000s, and now in 2025. There's always improvement. There's always dynamism. You are going to have to explain to people what it is you are giving to them, how it works, and why it's important they get it. Because vaccine usage is not just about you protecting yourself. It's also about protecting the people around you.
Exactly.
If 5 years from now, your 6-year-old is the very, very playful type that likes to be outside till late, gets bitten by a malaria-infected mosquito in the house, and we've been able to prove that the vaccine is so effective that it's even reducing the transmission of malaria. You, the adults, the parents, that mosquito comes to bite after, might not necessarily get malaria because of your vaccinated child that the mosquito bit first. So even if there's malaria in that your child's system, I mean, it might not be so severe. And malaria is a killer. Malaria is a serious, serious killer. One of the biggest killers in sub-Saharan Africa. But because it's so common and so easy to treat.
I mean, it's so common. I was about to say that it's so common and it's so easy to treat that I've ever, as a doctor, right, practicing doctor, have you had serious cases of people dying from malaria?
Yes. Dying not necessarily from malaria, but from the complications of severe malaria and untreated malaria, or not properly treated malaria. But I'm sure we are losing scores of people in the subcontinent to malaria that they believe they had treated, but they got adulterated medications that didn't work.
That's so sad.
And by the way, malaria testing in Nigeria and in sub-Saharan Africa is not as good as it should be. Any fever, malaise, headache, we've immediately attributed it to malaria.
It's so bad.
And it's because malaria is so endemic. Oh, it's a likely cause. I don't even blame practitioners who go ahead to treat malaria when they see patients who haven't had malaria in at least 2 months. Because the life cycle of malaria is actually 2 weeks. You can technically catch malaria every 2 weeks. It's near impossible, but from the science, you can. So, but before you treat anybody for anything, you should be testing. But then the test kits are not available. The reagents that they use to test the blood is not available. Getting